Good afternoon and welcome everyone to this wonderful Sunday on October 25th. I'm so pleased that we are being able to gather today to have a conversation that will be, in many parts, very rich. And what I mean by rich is that there's going to be some frustrating parts that we talk about. We're going to make real, valid, and value the experience around election anxiety. Now, a little bit of a disclaimer, this is not a political discussion. However, we will be talking about politics, that we are not political commentators. However, we will be talking about our lived experience in this election cycle and the impact that it's having. And we also hope to invite you in to have the conversation with us. With that as well, we can offer some tips and strategies and tools to help you to manage your own experiences. Joining me today, I'm so excited to have my friend and colleague, Dr. Angela Kinslow, who is a best-selling author. You have seen her on Sonora Living Arizona. You have seen her in giving talks in other conventions and in conversations about mental health and minding your mental health. So pleased to welcome Dr. Angela Kinslow to our conversations with the three Psych Docs.
Thank you, Dr. Melton.
Also joining us this afternoon, Dr. Evelyn Burrell, who is the 2020 recipient of the State Psychological's Diversity Award. She is also the president-elect of the association. She is the federal advocacy coordinator, and all-around badass. So I hope she forgives that last part, but when it's real, it's real. So please welcome Dr. Evelyn Burrell.
I'm completely down with being a badass. It's like a goal, right? I'm 100. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Ladies, again, I just want to acknowledge that this conversation that we are going to enter into and invite other people into is very real, right? It's not as if our degrees can separate out for us our experience of our own election anxiety and the impact of our national, social, cultural moment is having on us. But to start us off, I'm wondering, if you can share your own thoughts about what election anxiety is. Like, is it a real thing, or is it just some new pop culture term that we are using?
I think things evolve, right? So I don't know that I would say it's a pop culture term. And I would say it's a new thing for our generation, right? When we look back historically, I'm sure election anxiety has been something that each generation, when it comes to people of color, have had to go through, right? You look at, Black people weren't allowed to vote. Women weren't allowed to vote. Then when Black people were given the opportunity to vote, then you had to pass a literacy test. And then you had to do this and you had to do that. And so whenever there's voter suppression, I believe there's definitely election anxiety.
This is history in the making. So when you kind of consider the historical aspects, as Dr. Kinslow indicated, and we're seeing it right now in real life, long lines of people just trying to vote. The voter suppression is really amazing, especially in communities of color, having to take hours out of their day just to drop off a ballot out of fear or concern that it won't be counted or that it'll be lost in the mail or kind of whatever that process was. And so we're back in a time that I don't know if any of us really anticipated to be in. And it almost feels sometimes it's like you're calling upon your ancestors who died for this, right? Like they died for the opportunity for us to be able to vote. And now we're at a point where we have an opportunity to vote, but some people are, again, being very much so limited.
Yeah. And go ahead. No, just to piggyback again off of what Dr. Burrell is saying, I mean, just voter suppression. I have a old colleague of mine who doesn't live here. We're in Arizona. She doesn't live here in Arizona. And so she stood in line, and she said it was like all day, like 5 hours. She stood in line. They scanned her ID, and somebody else's name popped up. So she wasn't allowed to vote. how does your ID, your government issued ID, scan with somebody else's name?
Weird.
You know, so things like that. I know here in Arizona, some of the concerns is that, you know, signatures have to be authenticated, and we don't have any policy to be able to know if your ballot has been rejected or not. It's only if it's been received.
Right. I mean, at least you can check. I know I checked mine to make sure that it was received and verified. But again, it's even just kind of opportunity, you know, if you have the opportunity, if you have, you know, internet, if you have, if there's any disruption, if you've had any issues in the past, you know, via signature, if your signatures change, you know, sometimes something like that might occur, and your signature might even shift over the course of several years. It, you know, again, it puts us kind of all in this position of what barriers are being placed. And then why are those barriers being put in place?
As you're talking, I'm having a lot of thoughts of like similar stories that I've heard, right? This is not just like a fantasy book or, you know, things that I'm reading that are in, you know, fiction novels. Like I'm hearing stories from people that I know. I'm hearing stories from people that I trust their judgment. And it really just calls to mind all of these different, you know, experiences of watching, you know, political pundits and commentators go at it, right? And voicing all of these opinions. It reminds me of seeing all of these memes about, you know, political candidates and their platforms and their statements. And we can't forget all of the ads and the negativity that I'm experiencing or seeing in the ads. And when I think about that, oftentimes I have to pay attention to how much I am externalizing this idea of what election anxiety is, like all of this stuff that's happening in the environment, and pulling back in some ways to connect with, like, what am I holding as I'm observing, as I am exposed to in many ways, all these different things. And so I think, you know, in acknowledging election anxiety is real, it's not just what is externally playing out in our lived social climate, but also like the impact that it's having, right? So I know that for me, there is an increased anxiety in terms of the muscle tension, in terms of the kind of rumination around what's going to happen, and all of these thoughts about almost catastrophizing depending on, you know, the outcome. If there's going to be an outcome, the uncertainty, the doubt, the questioning, the suspicion, sometimes some paranoia, like conspiracy theories that I usually would kind of like, oh, that don't make no sense. I'm kind of like, oh,
that sounds a little like it could be possible.
Right. So acknowledging both the external reality as well as the impact, I think, is so important, because it can be crazy making. And if you're not paying attention to it, you become less able to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's talk about some ways, Dr. Melton, Dr. Burrell, let's talk about some ways that people can take care of themselves. Because again, just like you said, Dr. Melton, this conversation, we're not going to necessarily talk about our personal politics, but we really want to be able to help people with managing the anxiety that's coming along with these next, you know, less than 2 weeks. And then what does life look like after the election, right? So what are some things that we can do to be able to manage those thoughts, to help us not ruminate, to help our bodies, you know, not be in fight or flight and have the rapid heart rate and the sweaty hands and the easy to, you know, anger or irritability? You know, what can, if I wasn't a psychologist and I didn't know these skills already, what can I be told that would help me?
Well, I think right now, one of the first things that comes to mind is creating a safe space for yourself and for your family. You know, I saw in our neighborhood that a few signs had been taken down. And when I was on my morning run, I saw a sign literally cut up on the side of the corner. And I thought, oh my gosh, this felt dangerous. You know, my thought didn't go to someone kicked or ripped it. It's that someone had a knife or a weapon, got out of the car, walked over to the sign, cut it up. And so my thought, you know, I became very anxious and very thoughtful about my surroundings in that moment and the area that I live in. And then it turned into, how do I make sure that my home is safe, that I feel okay, at least in the confines of my own home with my family, and what does that mean for me? And what does it mean for my family? So how do I do that so that if and when there is kind of any concerns, I mean, to be honest, we've seen the videos of people making statements about, war and coming for folks and don't matter this, that, and or other. So how do you protect yourself and your loved ones under threat of violence?
So that sense of safety, psychological safety as well as physical safety, when it's real, right? Not just something in your head, but it's real.
So I think one of the things is being mindful of social media. What are you seeing? What I know that many of us are seeing are people who at one time were friendly, who were maybe just social media friends or family in real life. We're seeing opposing views causing a lot of strife and discord. And if you're not comfortable saying, I'm going to unfriend this person because I still want some type of relationship with them, at least on Facebook, you can mute them, right? You can say for 30 days, put this person on mute. You've not unfriended them. You can still go look at their stuff, but you have to be intentional with it. Their postings just won't show up in your news feed. That's one way, at least with social media, where we can start to protect our psychological health with not being bombarded with everything that's so negative. And if you're comfortable unfriending, unfriend, block, I don't want to see it, I don't want to hear it, bye. That's easy too. That's very, very easy.
Even with just unfriending from let's generalize that from outside of a social media presence to like interpersonal relationships, like people that you know well. So there's grief and loss that's coming along with this as well. Your close friendships, people that you love, people that you care for, they've always been part of your family or of your life or whatever. And then we're seeing kind of the separation and this loss of the person that was my go-to. Maybe I can't talk to them about, some really pressing issues right now. And the friendship has been disrupted. And so part of that anxiety we're seeing even outside of the election process is now of like, well, who do I go to? Because I'm starting to lose some of my close friendships and close family members and relatives. Holidays are coming, so on and so forth. So again, protecting yourself and protecting your relationships, even if that means setting really strong boundaries of, I love you, we can't talk about this. And I'm not willing to talk about this with you because we need to be able to get through this as, as a couple, as friends, as family. And so I have to really put a boundary down that we're not going to be able to have this conversation if our relationship is going to continue on.
Yeah. And creating boundaries is absolutely one of the best things that we can do for ourselves, right? Whether it be personal boundaries or professional boundaries. The more boundaries we create and we stick to them, then the more protected we are.
Right. So true. In part of what you were sharing earlier, Dr. Kinslow, is that there's no one right way to do it, right? You really have to be attuned to and aware of what's going on with you and what is needed, because it may be unfriending, having a hard boundary of we're not talking or I'm ending the friendship, or it may be I'm just going to unplug from social media for whatever the reason. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge that part, that there's no one right way to do it. And I've seen so many different responses, right? I've seen the moments in the memes of people saying, if you believe X, Y, and Z, and you're voting in these ways, unfriend me right now. We don't have to have a conversation. I'm good. I see who you are. So again, connecting back to what Dr. Burrell was saying about loss, but also there's a piece of disillusionment, right? That could happen in terms of that jarring, like, oh my goodness, I would have never thought this person that I cared about or had some connection to would think this way, especially because we can't divorce politics from the racial realities and all of the diversity realities that we live in, that this person, we can't divorce that these political agendas have real life consequences for individuals, particularly diverse, minoritized individuals. And so we have to acknowledge that, as well as if I come to the point where I have to end a relationship, I'm going to have to end the relationship. I read an article by someone who I identified as being Filipino, who talked about the kind of jarring experience of fellow relatives voting differently and having a different political leaning than they did. And they were shocked by it, but also had this idea of, well, I'm going to be Filipino longer than I'm going to be, then the next, president will be the president. So I want to maintain these relationships, or even lean in curiosity to find out why people that are like me have such differing political views. Now, all for that person, do what you got to do. But some conversations I'm not willing to get into. Like, it really won't be a conversation. I don't have the energy. I don't have the interest. I'm not trying to change hearts and minds. I'm good, right? And that can vary depending on what day you catch me. So again, being able to have, the freedom to choose how you engage is important. But one thing I do know, if you're not taking care of your experience of anxiety, however you're holding it, it will begin to distort and even sometimes skew your thinking. So take care of what you're experiencing, and it will set you up to make even better decisions that align with your values, that align with what is important and meaningful to you.
Can I tell you a faux pas? It's actually kind of a funny story. Probably irony at its best. So, as many people may or may not know, currently I see active duty patients at the local military installation here. And now that the weather is getting a lot nicer, I'm all excited for taking walks. So I decide that I invite a colleague, and I'm like, hey, let's go take a walk down towards the flight line. So we walk down towards the flight line. The news station here already said that 45 had landed at the airport. So nowhere in my mind was it that airplane would be right there at the end of the flight line. So I'm taking my self-care walk. If you can't guess my political views, yeah. But I'm taking my self-care walk. I can feel good. It's nice and out. And right at the middle of the walk, because I got to get back, but the end of where I can walk to and right at the flight line is Air Force One.
Did you go vomit on the side?
No, all I could do is just laugh. Like, is that? I was like, is that? Oh, I thought they were at Star Harbor.
You also didn't ask for a tour. I mean, I don't care who's president. I kind of want to see what's going on in there.
No,
just want to get on a plane.
So I walked to the end of the street. Then there's a parking lot, and then there's literally a couple of buildings, and then a fence, and then it was the plane. So it was, I don't know, less than 1/8 of a mile. Like, I'm not good with how far that was, but it was right there. But no, I could not ask if I could have a tour. That would not have happened.
But real quick, one of the things I also want to come back to in terms of what to do with the election being, 8 or 9 days away, something like that. Have a plan. Have a plan for what you coping ahead, right? Have a plan for what you're going to do the day of and the day after.
Well, the problem, I think the problem that we're dealing with here, maybe again, when I speak to my own anxiety, is the plan might last for days because we may not know right away. Yep. Right. So I'm like, okay, I got a plan for Wednesday. I already got a plan. I'm going to go get my hair cut. I'm going to do that thing. Right. Take it off. Ready for a change, whatever. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go do some self-care. I'm just going to switch it up a little bit, get a new style. And then my other plan is to stay home and hunker down, right? Because I don't know. I'm working from home that week. And we're not going to have any conversations about politics or anything of that nature that week. I'm not going to see therapy clients that week, right? I'm just going to offer that to myself and close off my schedule. I had someone ask me if I could offer a consultation and diversity and inclusion training and consultation for them. And I was just like, I'm on break. At least those first 2 weeks of following elections, I'm not doing those. I'm not going to do it. So I've kind of, again, set up that boundary just even within my own work of making sure that I'm protecting, again, myself and my emotional health and learning how to pick my battles and who to engage with, who not to engage with, what conversations to join, when to kind of walk away or leave it alone. But again, I mean, I guess part of the rhetoric here in my own narrative is just the physical safety of, I don't know what's going on, but what I do know is there's been weird threats that have been made, and I'm not trying to get in on it at all. So I need to, hunker down and preserve to the best of my ability. So that's my plan. And I suggest that, everyone out there, not just for the day of, but for days to come, especially if we don't have an answer for a couple days, stay home for that weekend. We've been isolated in lockdown anyway. Revisit a lockdown, hang out for a little bit, and hopefully things start to kind of calm after a few days or a couple weeks, until the resurgence in January. And then we'll have all over again.
I don't know. When you were saying, so I think we each have our own self-care plan. I don't know if staying home would be the best for me. So I would caution saying, as a blanket statement for everyone to stay home, one, who's in your home?
Right.
Right? Is someone in your home and you have two different views, or right? So I think what I pulled out of that is, do have the plan and do what's best for you with whatever your circumstance is, so that you're taking care of self and those whom you care about.
Right. And I guess part of my thought is really specific to people of color. I think that when someone puts out a threat, you take it as seriously as you can. And so if someone's putting out a threat, then you have to think about, again, historically, what's happened when people of color have been threatened. It doesn't work out so well in our favor. So I think that it's important to keep those things in mind, and care for yourself. So yeah, if the threat is within your home, then you have to find out how to manage, and where is a place that you can go, and who are people that you can spend that time with, that you care about, that loves you, that's good for your heart, that's going to allow you to maybe decrease some of that anxiety.
Or if you live alone, right? And I guess I was even also thinking about people who are single and live alone, and how much more isolating that might be if they are fearful for safety, and if neighbors know, so there's so many things to take into account as to what that good care looks like.
Right.
But let's talk a little bit about practical things, even outside, like up to election day, that we can do to manage. I mean, it's very similar to what we do to manage typical anxiety, right? That's not associated with the election, but staying physically active, right? As active as you're able, when it comes to exercise, making sure you're drinking water and eating good nutrition and trying to get good sleep, staying in a routine, right? Being mindful if your thoughts start to spiral, get back to present, so then you can make a decision on where I want my thoughts to go, right? If the political ads are too much, or these ungodly text messages that I gave nobody permission. I gave no one permission to send me these messages. And I get them from both sides. And I'm like, unsubscribe. Another one comes. Unsubscribe. Stop. I just want to have a cussing match with this AI thing.
Sometimes I respond. They're like, "Have you voted? Have you?" But
I mean,
on the other end of that text.
So we're just being bombarded in ways that we would wish we'd have control, but I feel invaded on sometimes, especially when those text messages are coming in. That's my personal device. And if I turn it off, then my family can't reach me, but yet these unwanted text messages are. So some things, it is what it is. And whenever I talk about radical acceptance, I think of you, Dr. Melton. And so I just have to do some radical acceptance when it comes to those dang text messages. But just being really mindful of the.
I don't know. I think sometimes it is kind of fun to respond.
I hate them.
I do. But again, this is that difference. it's that differing, right? So like,
yeah.
For me, I'm like, oh, this might be a little entertaining. Have you? Yeah, I already put in my ballot. Who'd you vote for? Well, I'm not supposed to share that. Like, you called me. You're the one that started the conversation. I thought that this. You're the one that texted me. You asked me whether or not I was voting. I asked you whether this was supposed to be a back and forth. So if we're not having a conversation, don't text me. But if we can't have an open dialogue, don't call me over this. So I've actually found much entertainment in responding sometimes. I don't respond to all of them, but every now and then.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. What are some other things
whatever works for you?
Yeah. So what are some other things that we can offer to folks, outside of so up to the election? So being mindful of our thoughts, drinking water, eating well, getting good sleep.
Well, we have to keep in mind the physiological aspects too.
Right.
Dr. Milton, is your volume messed up?
Can y'all hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I thought I had spoken over you.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So just the physiological kind of aspects. So you might experience like a tightening in your chest, shortness of breath. You might find yourself holding your breath, not breathing kind of regularly. So coming back to that moment and taking those breaths, kind of catching back up, being really mindful about, your breathing processes, taking kind of slowed, regular breathing and breaths, and bring yourself kind of back to the moment. And give yourself grace to kind of recuperate and to recover. If you find yourself becoming really irritable, yelling, maybe getting a little snappy towards other people, if you're in a place where you can take a break, give yourself a 10 or 15 minute timeout to do something that's maybe kind of enjoyable. They're streaming Girlfriends right now on Netflix. Or Sister.
Yeah. I used to love
One-on-One, whatever that show was.
Oh, half and
it's
half.
So cute. Little Romeo coming around.
Oh, Lord.
Half and half, yeah. And they have the little quick things that you can watch that might, just kind of throw you for a little bit, and it's kind of whatever, but just kind of allowing yourself to regroup and giving yourself the grace to regroup, to recollect, and then reconnect with, whoever or whatever it was you were doing.
Yeah.
To piggyback off of that, some other specific things that you can do on YouTube, as well as other like mindfulness apps. So Headspace, Calm app. There are specific things I want to encourage people to take a look at. Progressive muscle relaxation. There are thousands of videos on YouTube with different facilitators. So progressive muscle relaxation is another technique to be able to release the tension that you carry physiologically in your body. So when your body rests, then your mind will respond in kind, right? That mind-body connection. Another one that can be really helpful is leaves on a stream, which is a kind of a way to allow your thoughts to not get entangled or enmeshed with your thoughts. So again, on YouTube, leaves on the stream, a very popular mindfulness exercise. And another one that I really like, to acknowledge the feelings that come, right? Soften, soothe, allow. Again, it's soften, soothe, allow. Another mindfulness exercise on YouTube, lots of different videos. So things to engage in that will be in some ways an intervention. It could also be like a prevention from getting, your anxiety ratcheting up to the point where it becomes very distracting, very impairing for getting into your day-to-day task, or even being able to make decisions that have long-term consequences. And I'm talking about relationships, right? Because we know that the election is, consequences, but we're talking about your relationships in the ways that you're engaging with other people. And that will matter so much leading up to the election and thereafter, because there's going to be an outcome. If it comes the next day or in 2 weeks, there's going to be an outcome. Yep. And whatever that outcome is, there's still the anxiety that will be present. I remember after the 2016 election, there was research done by the American Psychological Association that found that after the election, there was an increase in distress that was reported, and the number of people seeking services, and anecdotal stories of mental health professionals that their caseload was reporting distress directly linked to the outcome of the election that was having an impact on the relationships. So take care of yourself now, set you up to take care of yourself for healing, for coping thereafter. Regardless of the outcome, that is still going to be needed, right? because we still got COVID.
This year we
still got COVID around.
Right, that's what I was like, this year we got extra stuff. You know, this isn't just crazy election stuff. This is COVID.
Everything.
This is, I haven't maybe worked for several months and my money is funny, and I might, my kids looking at me for Thanksgiving and Christmas miracles, and
kids are all home.
The flu season, that there's so many other things that are going on right now that are going to add and increase to that. So again, it's caring for yourself in the way that makes the most sense, whether it's mindfulness. Dr. Michelle, that's kind of where you go with, right? Is being mindful and kind of coming back to yourself. Dr. Kinslow, you know, hiking, outdoors, regrouping, right? Becoming present kind of with yourself. You know, for me, I might take those breaks and walk and leave for a moment and go for a run, or, you know, hot shower, and, you know, maybe certain smells or senses. So you want to make sure that you're engaging in a way that works for you. And if one thing doesn't work, don't stop. Right. Shift, do something a little bit different and give that a try. And if that doesn't work, then try something else, because you'll find something that's going to allow for you to actually experience that calm and recognize that it may not be permanent. It might come to you temporarily. You may experience a calm for a few minutes or for a day. You might be able to work your way out of you know, an interaction that you successfully. It doesn't mean it won't come back. So as Dr. Milton had noted, start practicing those tools now. And so then by the time, you know, election and Christmas and New Year's, all that stuff comes around, you already have something kind of in motion that you can grasp at when you need it.
And the other thing and the other thing that we haven't mentioned is maybe go to therapy.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
that's obvious for a psychologist.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, this has been, I think, a wonderful conversation. I have to tell you, I had some dread about having a conversation about election anxiety because I'm experiencing it myself. And, you know, I think it's been some wonderful, great reminders. I appreciate both of you so, so much. I hope that everyone who's watching, you know, we didn't get anyone to join us. My laptop's over here. But in the comments, whether it be on YouTube or on our personal or professional social media pages, we will be monitoring that. So ask questions. If you have additional things that people can do, tips, tools, things that help you, share that as well. Let's keep this conversation going. We need to have a network. We need to be able to rely on one another, to be able to be compassionate for one another, to be able to give grace to one another, and to be in tune with those who we care about and who we love, because this stuff is real. It's real. Yep. And we want to make sure that we all get through this in a healthy, safe, and secure way.
I was feeling a little funky when we started too. So you guys checked in on me. That's the awesome part about having, you know, your girls and your ladies that are there and kind of surround you and love on you for a little bit. So I appreciate both of you always. So as you guys are, you know, as we're all moving forward and through this, use your community, use your crew, use your support, and go to them. And sometimes the outcomes can be really positive and get you back to your sense of self. Best of wishes to you.
Have much more to add in terms of the gratitude for the both of you, but also this platform to be able to have this conversation and connection. That it is, again, for me, about building resilience and empowerment, and just being able to have the conversation is important. So I hope that is useful for all of our other viewers, that you do take care of yourself in this moment, because we're in it together. Different experiences. So yeah, thank you.
All right, we'll see you next month.
Guys. See you next month.